Welcome to the last TGHT Talk session of 2024. We're delighted that you chose to join us and our speakers tonight as we explore the concept, the ideas, the realities of an unsettled heritage, confronting memory sites in post-Holocaust Poland. This is a topic which is rife with information and also emotions. And I have no doubt that our moderator, Dr. Alexandra Janus, and our scholars, Dr. Hilik Weitzman and Roma Sendika, will bring these concepts and these questions and the challenges to light. As usual, or for those of you who are first joining us, please know that you are welcome to put a question in the comments section. Our program, our conversation among our scholars will last approximately 40 minutes, and we will have time toward the end to take one or two questions from you. We're delighted that you're here, and without further ado, I hand over the conversation to Alexandra. Dr. Janus, please.
Thank you so much, Elise. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and to be in conversation with both Roma and Hilik, whose work I admire. And I'm very happy also because I think in many ways our interests overlap. And I had already a pleasure of collaborating with Roma on a project that we will be discussing today, and also be in conversation with Hilik at least at one conference and probably more to come, because we are all interested in what I think can be called legacies of violence, especially legacies of the Holocaust in Poland and East Central Europe. And I am here talking both as a scholar, but also as a practitioner. Because I represent the Zapomniane Foundation, which is an organization that is aimed at locating, marking, and commemorating uncommemorated burial sites of the victims of the Holocaust on the territory of Poland. And this is a very particular type of site, so uncommemorated burial sites, that is part of certain difficult heritage or legacy of the Holocaust and of the violence of the Second World War. But obviously, when we think of the territory of Poland and the larger territory of East Central Europe, we are confronted with many more types of this very troubling legacy of the Holocaust, and burial sites are one of them. Of course, we are dealing also with abandoned, destroyed, or problematically repurposed architectural heritage objects, countless synagogues, bathhouses, and other objects of Jewish architectural heritage that are now in various stages of decay, or some of them are renovated. We have neglected or desecrated Jewish cemeteries, and in Poland alone, we have 1,200 of them. And then obviously we have the material remains of the infrastructure of genocide. And this forms and exists in the landscape of Poland and East Central Europe. And obviously this is also, many of these sites are located next to where contemporary non-Jewish, mostly non-Jewish Polish communities live. So what I think is interesting, and what we'll be talking about, is what are these sites, how we can theorize them, how we can think about them, what they are, and how they function in the life of contemporary Polish society. And I think there is a tendency to think of what the Holocaust left behind as a certain type of void. And this is definitely true, because the people who used to live here are gone and they were murdered in the Holocaust. But then there is also a certain level of excess of materiality of what the Holocaust left behind, all the types of sites that I just mentioned. So while the people are gone and we have this void, we also have these very problematic, very material remains or traces of that violence. And my organization, the Zapomniane Foundation, is dealing mostly with one type of that legacy, which is the uncommemorated burial sites. And as an organization that originated from the Rabbinic Commission for Jewish Cemeteries at the Office of Chief Rabbi of Poland, we strictly follow the rules of the Halacha to locate and then mark and protect these burial sites. However, we also recently, a couple of years ago, teamed up with a couple of other Jewish organizations, NGOs from Poland, and we formed the Engaged Memory Consortium, so a consortium of organizations dealing with different type of sites on the territory of Poland and East Central Europe. And one of the goals of that consortium is to find new ways, new approach to remembrance and memory in public, that is based on civic engagement, the use of the arts also as a means of commemoration. And obviously the scale of that heritage that I just mentioned is overwhelming, and there are many organizations across Poland that are trying to deal with these sites, sometimes on very local, sometimes on more like regional level. And I guess we will also tackle that during our conversation. But first and foremost, as we will be dealing with uncommemorated sites, I wanted to also invite Roma and Hilik to talk a little bit about how they worked or like researched these sites and how they defined them. And both Roma and Hilik proposed certain approaches to understanding what these sites are and how they function. So I would like to invite you both to tell us a little bit about your research, and then the terms you proposed. Roma, in particular, you proposed the term non-site of memory to capture the nature of some of these of the sites I've mentioned, and I would like you to maybe elaborate a little bit on that to begin with.
Welcome. I hope you can hear me clearly, because I had some problems in hearing you, Ola. So I hope everything is okay. So the topic that we are discussing today is indeed extremely important. I started work with this thinking of these objects, uncommemorated sites, as something that really impacts identity now in Poland, not only of Jews who live here, who emigrated from here, but also those who live in Poland nowadays. So the project that Ola mentioned was a team effort to understand abandoned post-genocide geographies. That's the broadest description I could think of. And we simply followed something that could be called sites of history that, of course, witnessed this wartime violence, but never been given the status of symbolic objects that has those information plaques or monuments that give the visitor clear information what happened and how to behave and whom to commemorate. So these are these abandoned clandestine post-violence sites that at first glance, now we can see the first photograph that we prepared for tonight. At first glance, they are left for natural forces just to swallow them into the, let's say, non-human. And they're definitely not something that we quite often call sites of memory. That this is the concept that emerged in the 80s from France and refers to something that unifies the nation, that has been criticized a lot, but nevertheless it's been still used in memorialization processes on memorial policies. So our team that consisted of specialists of very different disciplines, from psychology to Jewish studies, with the help of archaeologists, geographers, and memory studies scholars, we try to understand mass graves that has not been commemorated. And at some point we questioned not only the geographical dimension, calling these sites non-sites, but also memorial dimension. We knew that something is wrong with the memorial level, definitely. However, if we could have another photograph, it was definite for us that these uncommemorated sites are not forgotten. And this is a very good example from Hrubieszów that we received from Zapomniane Foundation. and the photograph originated in another foundation, Pamięć, która trwa. So it's an old photograph from 2011, 2013. So it's a mass grave from 1939. So a very early example of a communal grave that never been actually a grave. Then in our work we questioned also the concept of mass grave, because grave actually suggests as a concept a religious ritual that is official and unofficial, but we realized that we are dealing with places that were rather a sanitation effort than religious effort, and had not been turned into any ritualized sacred objects. So we try to observe how these locations interact with contemporary neighbors. And Foundation Zapomniane Foundation was our leader. That thanks to Zapomniane, we visited, we found the sites, we tried to understand. So that's our work, and probably we could discuss also some more peculiar features of these objects. So now to Yehiel.
Yeah, so thank you, Rama. You mostly you referred to mass graves and grave sites that are uncommemorated and unmarked, that you in the project that you led, you decided and suggested to call non-sites of memory. While you, Hilik, in your work, you dealt with a broader group of objects, not only burial sites but also different heritage objects, calling them unsettled heritage. So could you also elaborate a little bit on what was your scope of interest, and what do you call unsettled heritage and why?
Thank you. Yeah, so first of all, I will say that my work was really informed by Roma Sondika's concept of non-sites of memory. And what I was trying to do in my research, in my book, Unsettled Heritage, is basically to try to treat also sites such as cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, ruins of synagogues, also in a way through the lens of non-sites of memory, in order to better understand and conceptualize the way that those sites maintain some sort of interaction with the local population. So my book actually dealt mostly with the post-war decade, with the communist years, so from 45 until 89. And it was mostly an historical research, but also an anthropological endeavor. And what I was trying to answer first is how these remnants of Jewish life, whether existing, partly destroyed, built over, or empty, how were these sites negotiated, treated, interacted with, mostly at the local level, by local officials, very low-key personnel, ordinary citizens. And the question that I was trying to understand is basically the question that those people in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and also today were and are dealing with, namely, what to do with what to do with these remains, what to do with the traces of the cemetery in the outskirts of town. What should we do? How should we treat the destroyed building of the synagogue next to the market square? And I was trying to understand and also decipher the different answers given by the Polish population to these questions, and to show how this answer received different meaning according to the different political and cultural settings. And what is interesting is that you can see in various forms that, just as Roma said, while on the surface it seemed that those places were desolated, abandoned, deserted, or just ruined, nevertheless, they continue to exist and to exert a very powerful presence. And you can detect this presence and this ambivalent perception also in daily practices of passersby, of in language, how people talk about it, and language hold meaning. And also, and I think this was my my main finding, that you can see these traces of this very ambivalent presence also in official documents, in allegedly very bureaucratical documents, very communistic in style, that allegedly dealt with a very practical question: what to do with this? Should we destroy it? Should we renovate it? Should we build over the synagogue? But then, if you read between the lines, and if you pay close attention to the language, to the repetitions, to the silences, to the subjects that people are afraid to talk about, you can see that this question, what to do with the material leftover, basically pertain to a to much deeper layer of the collective memory or unmemory. And basically, through the discussion and the interaction with the material traces, Polish population dealt with the question, how do we live next to the traces of our shared past, which is difficult to come to terms with. So I think, in a way, this is how I used and employ my concepts. And now, actually, my new project is actually dealing with a mass grave, which is more maybe more the classical definition of non-sites of memory in the town of Raigud. And there's a very interesting story there that involves all sorts of almost ritualistic practices of contamination of this place, and through the fieldwork and documents, I'm trying to understand how this place came to be as it is, and also to try to find ways, maybe, well, we can talk about it later, how to turn these places into active places of memory, or if you can use.
Yeah, I think you both tackle something that is very important, and also I think crucial for understanding how these sites function, at least in contemporary Poland, is that they are not commemorated, but they are not forgotten either, right? They exist in this and this is part of the definition that you, Roma, proposed, that they have this like ambivalent aura. They function in this very ambivalent way. So they are not actively remembered, but they are also not actively forgotten in a sense that, as you, Hilik, said, they exist in the language, in documents, in behaviors. You can see how people, for example, decide to omit them or to not to build over them, and so on and so forth in many cases. And I wanted to show you some pictures that can work as examples of that. And again, this is a picture that is sort of like mirroring another picture that Roma has shown already. This is a drone image of a plowing field, and in the middle you see like a group of trees, and then a singular tree over the, like, by the beige background, the tree in the middle. And this is a pear tree that marks a burial site of Jews murdered and buried in this field. This field has been in the hands of the same family since before the war. And this is how this particular group of people, first of all the family, but also the inhabitants, remember where exactly the burial site is. So this site is obviously uncommemorated, but it is also remembered. And this tree, as in the picture that Roma showed with this like unplowed piece of land, shows exactly, and it's also a sign showing to the local inhabitants and to the people who use this space this is where the site is. And we can go to the next picture, because once we started traveling through across Poland and finding these sites, it was also then the foundation also realized that there are certain types of markings that the local non-Jewish Polish communities use, or like representatives of these communities use to mark these sites. And we can't call them commemorations in a typical sense. However, this is, for example, a Star of David that was carved into a tree next to the site, next to a burial site of a group of Jews that were hiding in the forest in the east of Poland and were murdered. And this we know exactly the person who made this concrete mark. And we can go to the next picture, because this person even, and this is the same site, this person even included the name of one of the victims in the bottom of the picture. You can see the Rajli, which means for Razel. So it was the name of one of the victims who is buried there, who was the school friend, the person who made this mark went to school together with this Jewish girl from his town. And so as you can see, he not only marked it once, he created many markings on trees around the site. And he has been, like, he visited this site many times. And you can see also his sensitivity changing, because he started with the cross. We can see the cross on the tree and the name, and then he started carving Stars of David. So he also was thinking about how to commemorate or how to mark these sites, and his thinking evolved. And we can go to the next picture. And this is an example from a different place, and it's not very clearly visible, but there is also a cross on the tree in the upper part, and in the lower part there is a letter Z, or like Zet, which is stands for Jews in Polish. So there are these types of signs that are clearly a sign of some kind of memory that is being not only transmitted from one generation to the other, and that's also present in the materiality of these sites. So my question to you is, how do you, both Roma and Hilik, how do you understand the social resonance of these sites? Because as we can see, they clearly exist in the local memory cultures in this very ambivalent way. So how you define or how you see the social resonance of these sites and their impact on the local communities? And maybe we'll start with you, Roma. Roma, I'm not sure if you can hear us.
My question is if you can hear me, because I'm constantly getting some troubles hearing. Okay, so the interaction with the local community is a very complex issue, and that was the most interesting topic that we actually followed. You showed some example from Radecznica, from a place that we researched together, and the mass grave there. That was the hiding place of several local Jews who tried to survive the late years of war. It is so-called third phase of the Holocaust, and we tried in our of many people's eyes and generates until today strong responses, even if they are not named. We followed some observations of sociologists that worked in Poland and described this kind of behavior, non-memory. So kind of, as you mentioned, Ola, effort to hide, to stop some past from appearing. And local communities are quite described as to a large extent impartial or completely negatively inclined, or or simply non-interested. But we realized that actually what is happening in those small localities, small villages that we research, this is quite often some kind of latent memory and small gestures that actually allow those sites to be still identified. So the researchers that come, like Zapomniane Foundation, like Yahadin Unum, like other NGOs that try to find, locate, commemorate such sites today, they somehow get the information, so that the information, the knowledge is there, and the knowledge had to have some kind of medium. So this is the third generation that is sometimes is quite often giving the clues, so that the transfer must have happened. And the question is how. That was our research question, and we realized that there are some small gestures, some very minute actions, and these are forms of commemoration, but not those that we expect, forming our expectations from within those global memory culture or European memory culture that is built on museums and monuments and plaques and very clear information based on symbolic systems, so either text or iconic objects, images. So these forms of grassroots memory are more diverse, more unexpected, and you need some ethnographic or anthropological openness to simply acknowledge them, because if you come with those preformed expectations, you must miss them. So the situation in the
We can hear you.
Hola, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. I'm afraid that we have some technical difficulties, and Rama is not hearing us. So maybe, yeah, I see you now nodding. So I hope you can hear us. Maybe Hilik, you want to also jump in, because what Rama was saying is that there are these unobvious ways in which these sites function, and this is something you also mentioned in your previous and answering the previous question. And you also tackled because I think we are dealing with the issue that we know that these sites are remembered in a sense in these like unobvious forms, but then they are not conventional memory sites. So the one issue with them, as you said, with the mass grave in Riegert, is that there are these sites, they are somehow remembered, but they are not commemorated. And I think it's important I would like to hear from you, how do you see these local communities interacting with that site, and whether you see some potential for using that, or like for some potential for turning these sites into sites of memory.
Yeah, this is a very good question, and I think that I use the term. There is an interesting anthropological concept by Gertrude Koch, and she called this kind of very alternative ways of memory or unmemory, negative memorial practices. So we can see how there are certain practices whose aim is in many ways to obliterate and to desecrate and to profane. But while doing it, these practices, inadvertently, of course, they mark the place. So, so there is a very weird, strange, even pathological way of how memory takes shape. And I think it testifies to something very deep in the local consciousness that people are doing sometimes not necessarily out of conscious motives. So, for example, in this town, Raigurd, the mass grave of the Jews, became already in the 70s some sort of unofficial dump yard of the local population. And by the way, the story of this mass grave is also important because this is where several dozen Jewish victims of a local pogrom are buried. So they were murdered by their neighbors. So it might explain this very pathological ambience that this place acquired. So throughout the years, this place became an official dump yard, and then it was used to bury corpses of animal, and then the city opened an official dump yard there. So if we look at all of these excessive layers of pathological marking, we can see that there is something there. When I visited this place last summer, I realized that this mass grave is very far away from the town. It doesn't make sense to use it as some sort of dump yard. So it means that people went there. And what is interesting is that in recent years, there is some sort of awareness that something needs to be done with this place. And the city actually put a fence around this supposed place of the mass grave with signs in Polish saying, do not throw garbage, or and it's interesting because the signs "do not throw garbage" testify to the meaning and to the function of this place. And maybe the most important and difficult question is there a way to use this some sort of pathological or negative marking of this place and to turn it into some sort of place of active remembrance. Now, I don't know. This is, of course, a question that I think needs to be dealt with very cautiously and with the help of local leaders and local stakeholders. I think that the first step is to mark and to locate and to create some sort of agreed way of marking. Not necessarily a Jewish one, not necessarily something big and grandiose, but something that will, in a way, delineate its place and perhaps help to diffuse or to neutralize this unexplained, unacknowledged ambience that is there, and maybe by giving it some sort of more normalized form, it could generate some sort of grassroots attempt of taking care of this place, even if in places that are connected to very difficult and unsettling episodes from the past.
Yes, you're right, and also, in the case of our work, in the case of the work of the Zapomniane Foundation, this is usually we visit these sites, and this is maybe needs to be made clear that we are able to find these sites, and we have located 300 of uncommemorated burial sites of the Holocaust victims since 2014. We are able to find them because there is somebody in the local community who notifies us. So we don't just go, region by region or voivodeship by voivodeship to just, look for them. We receive notifications from local non-Jewish Polish communities, or at least one member of the community, and then we go and we respond to these notifications. And what is interesting is that we at the moment receive more notifications that we can handle as a team. So there is this. So people are ready to share this knowledge, and then they reach out to us, or they find, these notifications find ways to us through different paths and other organizations. But what is interesting is that there has to be somebody locally who is ready to take on the task of then doing something about the site. And in most cases that we visit, and I want to make that clear, that we visit the sites where somebody calls us, right, to come. And then when we come to these sites, usually our research that confirms the site, their parameter of the site, is the first step for a commemorate, leading towards the commemoration. But this is clear for us also, and we've learned that from our experience, that that it is crucial for the successful commemoration that it is an effort not only ours but also the effort of the local community, because as an organization operating from Warsaw, we are not able to safeguard and watch over all the sites across Poland. And we know that from the sites we commemorated, that the engagement of the local community, of local authorities, of local leader is crucial for the site to be really part of the local memory culture. So in the case of Reigrut, I also think, as you said, this is crucial that there is somebody locally who is willing to take on that task, right? To lead this effort with the engagement of all the other stakeholders. That is also important. Roma, before we open up for questions from the audience, your previous answer was interrupted. Would you like to add anything to that? To this the question of how to transform a non-site of memory into a site of memory?
Yes, I'm sorry that there's definitely a problem with the recording, and apologies for the transmission problems. So the commemoration in these scattered many numerous sites that we deal with now, especially after the Einsatzgruppen killings, so that's the so-called killing sites, execution sites. There are also small sites from various other types of violence toward Jews that still need some support and attention, and definitely the effort to commemorate them has multiple vectors. So definitely there are those who come from those memory centers, like bigger cities, universities, institutions, central institutions that are very important, that offers some important guidelines how to commemorate, why to commemorate. But without the grassroots village that we are talking about, there will be no success. So from in our project, it was quite clear that it's very important to build this broad coalition around such site and make the site included into identity of a given village, of a given city, so that people who live who live now in this vicinity could make their site their own.
Yeah, and I see already some questions in the comments, also tackling the issue of for whom this commemoration is important. I see one particular question about who like for whom they like to commemorate, and I think this is really important, because I would say for all the stakeholders. So I think it is important that the commemoration is not only an effort of one particular person coming from one particular group or community, but that there is a joint effort by the local Polish Jewish community, as for example in the case of the Zapomniane Foundation, when we come to the villages, that's who we represent. So we represent the Jewish community of Warsaw, but then also there is the effort of the local community, of the local authorities, and very often there's also involvement of the descendants of the Jews from the particular town or village, so that the commemoration is actually a way to engage these various stakeholders. And I think what is also interesting is that the process is also an occasion to negotiate the meaning of the site between these various groups, right? So this is not only, somebody putting up a plaque that he or she feels is appropriate, but there is a process, there is a dialogue among these groups about what kind of commemoration should be done and how it should be done and with whom. So I would say the most, and from our experience, the most successful, and by successful I mean, the commemorations that actually led to these sites being included in the local memory cultures are the ones that were conducted in this very multivocal manner. So I think this is very important, and I think that such a commemoration serves sort of all these groups, because it's something that is important for the local community, but there is also important for people who visit the village or the town, also descendants of the Jews from this particular town or village, that they have a memory site that they can also go to pay tribute and respect the victims. And also, so I would say this is the way in which, from our experience, this should be done. And I see also questions about the crosses used, the crosses on the trees. Yes, so I can respond to that because this is a picture I showed. So no, I don't think that these people necessarily understand whether a cross is an appropriate or inappropriate way of commemorating or like marking the site. I think this is something that is the first thing that comes to somebody's mind, because the only point of reference some of these people have is the way they commemorate members of their own community, right? Because these markers are very often made by second generation, so these might be people who never met any Jews in their lives, and they were born and raised in the homogeneous community, local community consisting of Polish Catholics. So they not necessarily have the knowledge about how to commemorate, and this is also something how to commemorate the Jewish victims of the Holocaust. And I think this is why in the first two pictures that I showed you, you saw that the one person started with the cross and the name of the girl he knew, and then he started using Star of David, probably because out of the reflection on finding a more appropriate way of marking. So I think you also see that in this particular case that he learned, that he gained some knowledge, that he reflected on it, and then he changed the way he marked the site. Roma, Hilik, if you want to jump in and comment on that, please do, while I also scroll, because we have many questions. And Roma, you know the case of Radecznica, so you also know, and you met Stanisław, who did the markings that I showed.
Yes, and I completely agree. The fact that people use the symbols they knew, it does not mean that they wanted to Christianize or deny a Jewish character of the Holocaust. It's important to understand this is grassroots. This is well meant, mostly done by people who really cared for what happened. So the attitude is definitely positive.
Yeah. And I see a question. There are some questions about the site, whether we know some of the sites in some of the villages. So it is difficult to answer the question. I personally don't know any newly discovered site near Tykocin, or there was a question about one more, another place in Poland, Raków, because as I said, we mostly come to sites where somebody is waiting for us or notifying us about a site that the local community knows about. So we as a foundation haven't been to these sites, but maybe there is, and it is probable that there are such sites. And maybe also local community know where they are, but I have no knowledge about these particular villages. There is a question about the change of political leadership in Poland, and whether this has impact on how this legacy is being expressed. And I think in my experience, and this is again, I will use the term that Roma proposed, I think these things are very much a question of vernacular memory, of a very local memory. And oftentimes when we travel across Poland, we are surprised by how much this local memory is disattached from this like larger national memory, or like these bigger, more global memory processes or trends. So we rarely see a direct correlation between discourses of memory, these globalized discourses of memory, and what is happening on this local level. I'm not sure how it works in Raigrud. Do you, Hilik, have any observations about things like larger political tendencies being impacting the local memory or not?
Well, I think in regards to Raigurd and also other towns, I think that the political settings do matter because they create some sort of norms that basically dictate some sort of understanding, at least to the level of local officials, of what is right or what is considered right and what is considered wrong. And the understanding that it's wrong, even some sort of political, cynical understanding that having such desolated or desecrated Jewish site or mass grave, it's wrong for many different reasons, and it creates some sort of understanding that something should be done. And I could feel this understanding in Raigud and other places, that you see some sort of attempt to do something, but actually, very interestingly, sometimes this attempt to do something to commemorate or to acknowledge a place of Jewish burial leads to results that are often very contested, because then you have the question of whose memory is it, and what is the meaning of this memory, and you can sometimes detect the tendency to commemorate in a way that closes the discussion, in a way that is basically some sort of paying homage to this societal need or social demand, in a way that doesn't necessarily encourage an open discussion of what happened there, and instead trying to place some sort of monument that has the potential to, in a way, to convey that message that we did it. But this is very tricky and very ambivalent, and it happens when this vernacular memory interacts with the more official local memory, and then you have also the state, which is involved in different ways. And it's always the question of how do you, especially in places with stories of local involvement in the murder, how do you or should foundations like Zapomniane or others tell people how to remember and what to remember? Do we have the right to do it? And also, if we do it, can it really generate a deep change in the local memory? So these are all very difficult questions.
Yeah, and I also think that in many cases one side is different from the other, right? And one community is different from the other. But I think what you say is very true, and I also feel that, at least from our experience, the most productive ways are really like taking the process slow. So we really usually start with a simple wooden marker, and then sometimes it's a year or 2 years or even 3 years or even more, until we really put up a more permanent memorial. And we also observe that this time is important for this different stakeholders and different people to come forward. And there is this process of negotiations that you also now tackled, that it shouldn't be one organization and one person telling the rest how to remember or how to commemorate, but it somehow should emerge from a dialogue between different stakeholders. And there are places, especially when we speak about the communities that were implicated in the violence, this is really, and we rarely work in such places, because as I said, we come to places where somebody wants us to come, and in many of such communities there is nobody who wants us to come. So in most cases we deal with complex histories. Like in one of the sites that was the first site that the foundation commemorated, it was related with the history of a family, that part of that family was helping the Jews and the other part denounced them. So even within one family, we had, like different attitudes, and it was a very complex case. So what I think is interesting when you look at this local level is that it allows you to see the complexity of the entire story, and of the each site in particular. And usually when we come to these sites, we realized, who did what, and what happened exactly, and there is the entire complexity, and all the actors related to these sites. I also see that there are questions about some specific successful examples. So yeah, there are many examples like that. And if you, I saw that the link to our website was posted in the chat. So there are some examples on our website where you can see the sites being commemorated. These are the white dots. And yeah, like last month in November, we erected a permanent monument in a site where there used to be a forest hideout that became a burial site of the Jews who were hiding there. And so yeah, there are examples of that. And in our case, none of the sites we commemorated was vandalized, which doesn't mean that sites like that aren't vandalized at all. It's just it didn't happen to us, and there are examples of memorial sites being vandalized. So so we were just, first of all, maybe it didn't happen to us yet, and secondly, maybe also the way we approach commemorating these sites, giving time and also creating space for various communities to get involved, is also a strategy that helps to protect these sites for the future. I see Elise. Oh, you're muted.
So I don't want to interrupt this conversation at all. And I don't think any members of our audience want me to come in and sort of pull it to a close. First of all, the questions we will share. Thank you for those who posted questions. We will share all of the questions with our guest speakers because I'm sure they'll either respond or have some way of communicating about some of the issues, important issues that you've brought up. And I want to thank each of you, Roma, Hilik, and our master moderator, Alexandra. I think that what you're leaving us with is a whole, a very contemporary way, 80 years, 90 years later, of who's coming forward. Why are they coming forward now? Why is it possible now in Raigurd to think about at least marking this cemetery? Roma, I was struck, and I think many of us was struck by the strip of land and by the trees. This is as a grassroots way of saying, we know, you know, because you can see it. And it's part of it's not only a part of our memory, but it's a part of our physical being, our land, which we want to share this very tragic story. And we hope that we will continue this conversation. Thank you for bringing to all of us some very, very important issues, some very thought-provoking issues in terms of whose memory and how important it is to understand that there's the victims' memory and their descendants, and also the perpetrators, but also those who are bystanders and also have descendants. So in a sense, we're going from generation to generation, and thank you all for the research and the work you do and for joining us. For those of you who are in the audience, whether you're watching us now live or on YouTube, thank you for being with us. We look forward to seeing you on January 15th. In between, we wish you happy Hanukkah and happy holidays. I want to shout out to our team, and especially to Jakob Wishak, who's the person behind all of the images and the camera work and so forth. And I want to remind you, dear audience, that we bring this program to you, but it's based solely on your donations. So that if you're thinking of a last end of the year donation, please think of us. So with that, thank you, Roma, again. Thank you, Hilik, and thank you, Alexandra. And we look forward to continuing this conversation online, but certainly in person in the year to come.
Thank you so much.
Good night, or good afternoon, or good morning.